The Republican Guard was now on the run. When the Republican Guard's rear guard was destroyed at the Battle of Medina Ridge, Saddam Hussein became frightened that the Allies would push forward into Baghdad and that his defeat was imminent. General Schwarzkopf was fully prepared to have American tanks continue to push Saddam's forces toward the sea, but Colin Powell knew this would mean another day of fighting. Powell became concerned that the horrific images seen on the televisions in American households would stain the reputation of the U.S. military, and pushed for President Bush to declare a ceasefire. All of the main objectives had been accomplished, and there was no need for any more fighting. Both Colin Powell and General Schwarzkopf were in agreement with President Bush, and the ceasefire went into effect at midnight, February the 28th, 1991. Some American military advisors, as well as British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, believed that this ceasefire was premature, but the decision stood. General Schwarzkopf: I was just glad to have the victory in our hands with a minimum loss of casualties, and I was willing to settle for that, because that's a hell of a lot more than anybody's had in war in as long as I can remember. As a result of this war, Iraq's military was driven out of Kuwait, and its strength crippled. So, why wasn't Saddam completely removed from power in Iraq for his war crimes, and for suffering such a humiliating defeat? There are several reasons for this. The idea of pushing forward into Baghdad had been entertained, but ultimately did not happen. The UN sanctions specifically called for Iraq to be expelled from Kuwait. Nowhere in those sanctions did a full invasion of Iraq and the overthrow of Saddam Hussein appear. Second, there was the strong possibility that a full invasion of Iraq would split apart the coalition. An invasion would lead to a super expensive occupation of Iraq, of which America would foot 100% of the bill, and the American military would have ended up staying much longer than it had any business being there. Lastly, there was the strong possibility that the resulting political unrest in Iraq would lead to the overthrow of Saddam Hussein anyway. There were indeed rebellious uprisings in Iraq. Civilians who disliked Saddam, disgruntled Iraqi soldiers, and even Kurds took up arms against the regime that they despised. Unfortunately, as a result of the ceasefire talks at the end of the war, Saddam and his top military brass were allowed to remain in power. These rebellions were brutally suppressed by the Iraqi military, since it was freely allowed to operate within their own territory. Reprisals against rebel villages were terrible. American military personnel were completely helpless. All they could do was stand by and watch, as they were ordered not to intervene. The Kurds in northern Iraq had to flee, and Saddam continued to remain in power. The victory in the Persian Gulf was deemed by some as hollow in the eyes of public opinion. However, many others felt this victory helped America regain its confidence after the Vietnam War. Saddam Hussein ruled until the invasion of Iraq in 2003. The political climate in Iraq continues to remain unstable, as its future remains uncertain after Saddam Hussein's deposition.